Have you ever observed the world around you and wondered why? In the midst of its endless noise, some souls walk with a deep quietness. There is a light in their eyes, a stillness in their heart, a strength in their foundation, while others seem to live adrift, caught in the currents of pleasing others, forever seeking a happiness that is not their own. The answer is not found in a new practice, an outer discipline, or a book of knowledge. The answer lies in a forgotten inner landscape. An ancient map teaches that a soul's path to becoming itself is not a rebellion against the world. It is a quiet awakening, where you learn to offer your gifts not from obligation, but from a place of deep knowing. So, what is the secret to this unwavering stillness, this inner peace? Today I invite you on a journey to find the source. If you are a soul weary from the roles you have played, longing to breathe as you truly are, this path is for you. At its end lies not a better version of you, but the you that has always been, waiting to be met. First, the way is not outward, but inward. The world we live in encourages the eye to look out. It presents images of a life fully possessed, success, form, connection, a story validated by many. But here is the paradox. The more you gather these outer things, the more vacant the inner space can feel. The smile is present, but the energy is gone. The success is achieved, but the peace is absent. An old teaching says one who looks outside dreams, one who looks inside awakens. From a very young age, many are taught the path of harmony, to be gentle, to be a calming presence for others. You learn to bend when your spirit wishes to stand tall, to agree when your heart is a clear no, to place your own feeling last, because that is the way of goodness. With time, the sound of your own voice becomes a distant whisper. You begin to believe you never had a clear voice to begin with. The teachings call this the outer garment, the role you wear. It is not you. It is a form constructed to be welcomed, to be loved. But when a soul lives too long in this borrowed garment, it forgets the feeling of its own skin. It can no longer tell the difference between its true nature and the role it has perfected. Imagine a great tree admired for its full leaves, its strong branches, its place in the forest. Yet at night, when the winds blow, it feels a deep hollowness in its core, for its roots have not been nourished. Or imagine one who tends to everyone's garden, making sure every flower has water and sun, but cannot remember the last time they felt the earth on their own hands or the sun on their own face. These are not signs of failure. They are a call from within, a sign that you have lived long in the world of reflections and forgotten the world of the source. And that inner world, as the ancient wisdom shows, is not an empty, quiet room. It is a wild forest, a deep ocean. It is filled with the parts of you that have been forgotten, left behind, or turned away from. This is where the shadow lives, and in the shadow is held everything you were taught to fear: your fire, your storm, your quiet longing to be free, to say no, to live from your core. It is the part of you that ran freely as a child, but was told it was too much, not right, not gentle. You contained it, you became agreeable, but in containing it, you also starved your own inner fire. The teachings do not tell us to cast out the shadow. They invite us to walk with it, for it is part of your wholeness. It is the dark, fertile soil from which your truest life force springs. A soul who does not know its shadow will always feel a subtle lack, asking, "Who am I?" Or, "Why do I feel this emptiness when I have everything?" But when you dare to turn and face it, you begin to reclaim a forgotten power. For example, a person feels the heat of envy when another succeeds. They do not dare to name this feeling for fear of being seen as small. They push it down, they perform nobility, and the energy turns inward, causing torment. But if they face this shadow and simply acknowledge the desire for their own light to be seen, to rise higher, they realize this energy is not a poison. It is a voice, a guide, a current urging them to grow, to step beyond the familiar shore. Only when this energy is seen and honored does it cease to be a destructive force in the darkness. An ancient text reminds us, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." How many of us ask, Why do I find myself on the same path, leading to the same pain? Why am I always giving more than I receive? Why can I not say no without a feeling of breaking a sacred law? These patterns are not born of weakness. They are born of unseen currents, operating in the dark. If there is a question that returns to you again and again, I invite you to write it down. Perhaps sharing it here, in this space. A single line shared can be the first light that enters a room long kept dark. And this is where the inner journey truly begins. Not in 10 minutes of meditation, hoping for peace to arrive. Not in a book, expecting change to be given. It begins in the quiet courage to meet yourself, without judgment. It is the journey of looking at your own reflection in still water and not turning away. It happens when you hear the voice inside say, I am tired. I am afraid. I long for more than this. And for the first time, you do not command it to be silent. The inner journey has no schedule. It unfolds in the moments you pause, the moments you feel the ache, the moments you question. It happens when you are brave enough to be with yourself and quiet enough to hear the language of your heart. The language that was your first language as a child, before it was muted by the world's noise. And then one day, you will find yourself taking a new step, not for anyone else, but for you. You will say no and feel no need to explain. You will walk a different way, even if every other person is walking in the other direction. You will stand before a fear that once made you small, and you will not retreat. This is not rebellion, it is awakening. A truly peaceful person is not one with a perfect life. They are peaceful because they are true to their own nature, even if that truth does not fit the vessel others have made for them. True strength does not come from a title, a perfect form, or the approval in another's eyes. It comes from the deep, quiet knowing, I am this, no more, no less. And that is whole. The secret lies here, not outside, but in the most honest meeting you will ever have with yourself. When a soul turns inward, it no longer looks for a rescuer. It becomes its own guide. And from that moment, the outer world no longer holds the power to define it. Second, reawakening the river within. As a soul begins this journey of meeting its inner landscape, its shadows, its wounds, the layers of borrowed garments it has worn, a turning point arrives. You do not only shed what is not you, you begin to recognize a sacred energy that was hidden. And in the depths of that inner world, you encounter an ancient blueprint, the source energy of your being. This is not a polished image of perfection made by the world. This is an ancient, wild, flowing life force. It is the sacred pattern that the wise have called an archetype, a primal form embedded in the energy of all life, across all time and all cultures. The teachings say that within every being lies an original nature of creation, of wisdom, and of connection to the great flow of life. Yet, our world has often asked us to quiet this flow, reducing it to a gentle stream, a role of service. Imagine a young child, perhaps it was you. This child loves to run, to climb, to be loud, to ask questions that have no end. As this child grew, their energy was shaped. That is not how one behaves. Is that the voice you should use? No one will welcome you if you are so strong-willed. And so, the inner river, the voice of instinct, of curiosity, of untamed creativity, was taught to flow within narrow banks. It was labeled as too much, as something that needed to be controlled. As an adult, this soul carries a sense of something missing it cannot name. They may chase beauty, perfection, validation, but behind the focused eyes and the careful posture, there is a faint whisper. There is something I have forgotten. That is the sound of the river calling you back. No one is born separate from this inner river. It is written into your being like a magnetic compass, guiding you toward creativity, intuition, softness, the ability to receive, and a deep sense of connection. But with time, this energy is often put under pressure by the world's rigid structures. Under this weight, the flow does not vanish. It retreats. It goes underground, making way for protective layers of stone, formed from old hurts. Ancient wisdom speaks of this as a separation from the archetypal self, where the deepest part of your nature is sealed away, waiting to be rediscovered. This flowing nature is a spiritual state. It is the gentle, profound inner energy connected to feeling, intuition, and the quiet knowing of the heart. But for many, this energy is guarded by fear. When the inner child is wounded, this flow is the first to be damned. A child scolded for feeling too much, told their softness is a weakness, or laughed at for a wild dream, grows up learning to suppress emotion, to hide their gentle nature, and to feel safe only when they are hard, rational, and in control. But at what cost? A separation from the very source of their own creative power, from the natural way of their soul. This flowing energy is not about form or function. It is a sacred force within all of us. It is the part of your being that receives life, that flows with it rather than fighting it, that whispers, slow down. You are safe here. It is joy, feeling, vulnerability, and the simple beauty of being. But for many, this flow is stopped early. You may have learned that feelings are messy, that softness is weak, that your desires make you a burden. Perhaps you grew up in a world that rewarded doing and logic while shaming intuition and sensitivity. As a result, the inner child who once danced freely, dreamed boldly, and felt without shame, learned to become smaller. They learned to hide their nature, trading joy for performance and wearing strength like armor, not knowing that this armor was slowly burying their own truth. The archetype of the inner child, the teachings say, is the root of our freedom and our life force. So if you find it hard to rest, to receive pleasure without guilt, or to express your nature without fear, you are not broken, you are blocked. You have been surviving in a world that asked you to leave yourself behind. Now is the time to return, to offer safety to that inner child, and let them guide you back to the river you were always meant to be. Picture a small stream moving through a valley. At first, it is fluid, cool, finding its way around stones and trees. It flows by instinct, by its own nature. But one day, it comes to a great dam. Not understanding why the dam is there, the stream learns it must adapt to survive. It learns to find small cracks, to move through narrow passages. It starts to believe that to flow with its full strength is dangerous, that it will only meet more resistance. The river within you is like this stream, sometimes gentle, sometimes a great force, but always a natural, untamed essence. But you have built many rules, many old beliefs that say, I am only worthy when I make others comfortable. Like the stream blocked by the dam, the deepest part of your flow no longer reaches the light. To restore this flow, you must first feel safe in your own body, your own heart, your own feelings. This is done by reconnecting with the inner child. An inner child that was not met with unconditional presence cannot feel safe. And so, instead of receiving life and love, the adult self becomes suspicious, controlling, trying to understand everything. You build fortresses to protect yourself, not seeing they are also prisons that confine your deepest nature. The inner river is not reawakened through effort. It is stirred through surrender, through presence, and through trust in the natural current of life. But a soul that carries the fear of being hurt cannot let go. It is always watchful, always analyzing, always needing to be certain before it can trust. In that state, it moves away from its flowing nature. Not because it lacks it, but because it was taught that to live from it is unsafe. Remember the last time you held back your true feeling for fear of being judged, or chose silence over speaking your need for fear of being left. That was the moment your inner river was dammed once more. And the great sadness is, you may have thought you were being mature or being wise, when in fact you were repeating a survival pattern from your earliest days, when your inner child learned to contain itself in order to belong. The ancient wisdom does not see this restoration as a task, but as a sacred duty, reconnecting with your original soul through acceptance and compassion. It is daring to sit with the parts of you that were labeled weak or too emotional and to say, I see you. You belong here. You are me. When a soul begins to reconnect with this river, it also unlocks a buried life force intuition. It cannot be measured by tools, but we have all felt its presence. A quiet feeling in the body that something is not right. A sense of This is not my path. A silent pull toward a different direction. Yet with time, many learn to distrust this inner compass, calling it foolish or irrational. They learn to ask everyone else before they ask themselves. The teachings say intuition is the language of the soul, the bridge between our small self and the great self. A person disconnected from intuition is like a ship without a rudder. It may look sound, but it has no true direction. When a soul begins to awaken this primal flow within, the flow of its source energy, of intuition, of its true essence, the first feeling is not always relief. It is often disruption. You are no longer who you were, but not yet who you are becoming. This is the beginning of the great path of individuation, the journey to wholeness. Not by becoming an ideal person, but by returning to the unique, irreplaceable nature of who you are. Third, the path of becoming whole. The great spiritual traditions never taught that the goal of life was to become the best version of yourself. They were not concerned with perfection. They did not encourage you to shape yourself to an outer standard. For them, the ultimate purpose of a life was to become whole, not to become better. This journey toward wholeness is the path of individuation. Put more simply, it is the journey of returning to your true self. This path is not about adding something new. It is about taking away all that is not you, the beliefs you have borrowed, the roles you have learned, the layers you have built to survive in the world. It is the work of facing your shadow, the parts you turned away from, and welcoming them back as part of your own life force. It is bringing into the light of your awareness the inner child, the flowing river that was sealed away, the memories that seem to have no meaning. This path is not an ascent into light and radiance. It is a journey downward and inward to the roots. It is meeting your wounds, making peace with your history, and learning to live with your entire being, the strong and the weak, the clear and the confused, the dark and the light. Only by holding all of these parts can you step out of a divided life, where you are always trying to become someone else, and into a life that is truly yours, undivided and deeply rooted. One soul who walked this path shared this. For 30 years, I lived as if wearing a garment that was not mine. I behaved as expected. I smiled when my heart was heavy. But when I began the journey back to the small one within me, to the parts of myself I was once taught to be ashamed of, I saw that I had never truly lived a single day for myself. From that moment, I could not go back to sleep. This process of becoming whole is not an easy one. There will be times you feel lost. You no longer belong to the old world, but you do not yet know your place in the new. This journey requires the courage to enter unfamiliar territory. Old memories, inherited beliefs, fears without a name. The wise have taught that we cannot truly grow until we face the spiritual inheritance we carry. The voices in our head that are not ours, but belong to our parents, our ancestors, society, or the rules we have adopted. A soul on the path of wholeness slowly begins to distinguish between these voices. Not to reject them, but to discern which voice is their own and which is an echo from the past. And here lies the great challenge the world around you will resist. When you change, you disturb the ground others stand on, and not everyone is ready for the ground to move. A person who begins to say no instead of yes, who creates a boundary where there was none before, who stops performing the role of pleasing everyone, is not being unkind. They are not in rebellion. They have simply stopped playing a part. But this can make others feel uncomfortable. They will ask, "Why are you so distant now? Is something wrong? You used to be so much easier to be around." What they are truly saying is, "I am not comfortable with you no longer being a person I can predict and control." A woman shared this story. From childhood, she was the anchor of her family. She held the peace, absorbed the unspoken feelings of her mother, her father, her siblings. But when she grew weary, she stopped carrying emotions that were not hers. She began to create space. She stopped calling every day to be a container for her mother's anxieties. The result, she was called selfish, cold, ungrateful. But deep in her core, she knew that for the first time, she was living as herself. And that though it was painful, was freedom. The teachings call these moments a meeting with the self. The purpose is not to conquer, but to understand. No longer divided between an ideal self and a real self, a soul on this path begins to rearrange their entire inner world, their values, their relationships, their boundaries, the very way they move. Each day becomes a choice to live from a place of intention, not from a place of habit. Each choice is a stone laid in the foundation of a new self, one that is not built by the world, but one that is grown from within. You may be on this journey now. Perhaps you have felt confused, made choices others did not understand, or stood between two worlds, not sure where you belonged. If you wish, you can share your path in the space below. Your words may help another feel less alone on their own journey. This is not easy. That is why so few walk the full path of becoming whole. It demands solitude. It demands the release of familiar roles. It demands the courage to stand alone in a room of many and not lose the connection to your own center. But it is in that very solitude that a new strength is born. An old teaching says, loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things which seem important to oneself. The path of wholeness gives you the clarity to speak what is important, even if only to yourself. As a soul walks deeper on this path, they begin to see with new eyes. Things that once seemed solid, jobs, relationships, reputations, may fall away, and there is no fear. Not because you no longer need them, but because they no longer define you. You begin to build a new system of values, one where loyalty to your own soul is higher than loyalty to a role. You begin to choose your company not out of need, but because they do not ask you to be small. This freedom is not the reckless freedom of a rebellion. It is a profound freedom. It is like standing in an open field, feeling the wind, without the fear of being blown over, because at last, you know where your roots are. From this place, you become unshakable, not because you no longer feel pain, but because you no longer run from it. This journey marks the end of an era of living by formulas, by expectations, by borrowed truths. And it marks the beginning of something sacred, your own life. Not a copy of another's life, not an ideal image, but a life that you compose note by note with the conscious choices of each day.